We all probably know a person that's talented, but there's no stability in their life. One day they're confident, broken the next, so high in emotions and don't know what they're doing anymore. But the day before, it seemed like they had their whole life set. They're disciplined one week, the next week, they lose motivation. It feels like they're not themselves anymore. They step into a room on one day and they can change everyone's mood. The next day, it's like it's a completely different person in the room. As I'm mentioning and as I'm speaking about this, you probably got someone in mind, and that person could probably be you. And just to get things straight, that does not mean that this person's weak or this person's less than. But what that does mean is that their identity has been broken into fractions. It's been fragmented. It's been separated. And what I'm actually going to do is show you the different types of characters that can show up in a person's life when their identity isn't set and their self-esteem isn't strong. So when life gets hard and rough, one of these characters will come out and it will start to express itself through your life. So as we touched on before, the mask. So the person or the version that you put on, knowing that it's not you, to get some form of validation and approval. Now, there's different aspects of you, and when you don't understand them in its totality, they have the ability to influence and control you. So the first one we're going to touch on is going to be called wholeness. Now, wholeness is the version of you that is not easily hijacked. Now, this doesn't mean that things like fear and anxiety don't have the ability to have some form of influence or you don't feel them. But what it does mean is that you don't give them the authority to drive the ship. They're not the ones directing and leading your life. You can feel fear, but then you choose to be courageous. So despite of how you feel, you still act knowing what you've come here to do, which is, in other words, boldness. So the boldness does not come before you act. It comes after you realize that even though I feel this way, I'm still going to act. So that's courage. And the result of that is seen from other people as boldness. But you, being the person that had to make the step, know that fear was on the other side. So you had an option and a decision to make. Am I going to be courageous and act in boldness? Or allow the am I going to allow the fear to have control, drive the ship, and miss out on the opportunity? So a lot of us are waiting for things, but the opportunity could have come and we just didn't act because we were waiting to feel courageous, or we were waiting for this feeling to come upon us that would allow us and empower us to do. No. So signs that a person is operating in wholeness and they don't have fragments and their identity hasn't been broken into fractions is that they pause before they speak. So they're not acting on impulse, they're not acting on their emotions, they're allowing and analyzing the situation and thinking about, if I say this, what could the ramifications be? If I act in this way, what could the consequences be? Is this worth my time? Is this worth my energy? Because whether you don't speak, it takes energy. Whether you don't act, it takes energy. Whatever decision you make to do, it's going to take some form of energy. Even acting and withholding and withdrawing and resisting the urges that you feel, it takes energy, but so does action. So acting in your emotions and acting emotionally and acting based on what people have said and this person said this and I've heard this and energy. You choose standards over your emotions. So you start to have and you have an understanding of your value, you have an understanding of your worth, and you don't allow emotions, your own and others, to influence you to step outside of the standards that you've set for yourself. You don't go around begging for validation. If one person that you were once acquaintances with or once friends with or once cool with doesn't appreciate you or they're moving out of line and they're not moving in line with the standards that you have, they're not It's things aren't making sense anymore. You don't beg for their approval. You don't beg for them to be in your life. It just is what it is. And that doesn't mean that things become cold between you two, but it just means that how we once were isn't how we can continue to be. And that's life. There's people that you will walk with at one stage and you won't speak to them again. You may bump into them one day. It doesn't mean that things are awkward or weird. It just means that life happened. And there's people that you do life with for certain periods of time. There's some people that are here to teach you lessons. There are some people that are here to build with you. And there's some people that are just here for the moment. And when you learn to differentiate and you have standards for yourself, it's easier to filter through that. When you don't, and you just go with the wind, you start putting people in positions that they have no right to be in. You don't need an audience to be disciplined. So you don't need people to be around you for you to start doing stuff. When people come into the room, that's when you start opening your book and start, you know what you're doing, you know why you're doing it, and you don't need people to motivate you to do what you claim to want to do. So this is the goal of the development at Purpose Bound. It's getting to this place of wholeness. So it's finding out all the areas that there's holes, all the things that are being filled with, all the aspects of a person's life that are being filled with things that don't matter, material things, attention, validation, all these different aspects, and bringing them to a place of wholeness. We cannot help anyone get to that place. That is something that only a person, through their own reflection, through their own time, and through their own effort. And by effort, I don't mean hard work. By effort, I just mean the time to analyze their own life. Only they are able to come to this place. No one else can do that for you. There's no book, there's no workshop, there's no masterclass, there's no anything. Nothing will help you get to that place except you. So the second type of characteristic that can come out when the life gets hard and pressures are there and you feel like your back's against the wall. This is the mask. We touched on this previously. And this is when you can't operate in settings where other people are present without putting this mask on because you haven't accepted yourself. So because you haven't accepted yourself and people have now accepted you as this mask who isn't you, you can't show up as yourself. Then this is where the toxic aspect starts to come in because you start to believe that that's you. And then your identity and everything about what you do is now geared towards being liked and getting approval. So when you don't get the approval, you feel like you need to do something. You need to appeal to everybody else to get that kick because now your adrenaline and what is driving you now is the approval of people. It's the approval, it's likes, it's attention. And the big lie is that you think that if people see you in a certain way, then you're cool. Life's sorted. But what you fail to realize is that that's why you don't get the results because the results that you want are on the other side of failure. So you need to fail a few times before you actually get the results. But because you don't want to be embarrassed because of the mask that you've put on, you don't want to put your hand up in class and get the answer wrong because of how you might be laughed at, because of how you might, because the mask will start to uncover itself. Because the person wearing the mask doesn't want to be seen for doing things that are wrong. They only want to be seen for things that will make other people happy. So it has nothing to do with themselves. So they won't put themselves in positions to develop and get answers wrong to then actually be able to understand how to get things right because the whole job of the mask is to mask who they are. So they can't showcase that they don't know things. They have to be right. So to always be right, they can't be seen in situations where they don't know things. So the person that wears the mask would rather be cool than be great. Then the third one is the avoider. This could be called the shadow. We touched on this as well, the things that you're hiding under the carpet. And when you hide things under the carpet, it starts to leak out. This could be the impulsive behavior, the aggression that just comes upon you suddenly. Because you're hiding all these things within you, it has to come out at one stage. And it will come out when you don't want it to. It will come out at the worst possible moment and in front of the worst possible person that it could present itself with. It might look like you don't care, even though you do. And even when you care the most, what will be displayed is the most nonchalant type of behavior that you could ever even imagine when you care the most. And people that don't understand these things will actually believe that you don't care. Meanwhile, deep down, it means the most to you. And these things aren't actually bad. So it's not about removing and hiding. It's about accepting. So the person that operates in this avoidance and in this shadow hasn't accepted themselves as well, similar to the mask. So let's do a little test. So out of the three that we mentioned wholeness, we mentioned the avoider or shadow, and then we mentioned the mask. So I want you to actually not just listen along, but actually think and even write down when things get a bit much, when you're not thinking about it, which one presents itself? Because it's not about you using effort, it's about what is just naturally flowing out of you. So when you're at school and things are getting a bit much, what comes out? Which character? Which characteristics start to showcase themselves? Is it the shadow? Is it the mask? Or are you whole? When you're at home, when you're at school. The interesting part is that which one do you respect? Because you may believe that you're whole, but then you respect the person or the type of people that are wearing masks because they are the quote unquote cool kids. They're the ones that everyone likes. They're the ones that are able to do whatever they want. So you see freedom in the people that are wearing masks. So that then proves that you might actually be in the avoider category, the shadow aspect, the one that hasn't actually fully accepted themselves. So there might be parts of you that you're hiding, parts of you that you're afraid to showcase or present people with, who is actually who you are. What you're afraid of showcasing is actually what will provide you with the people that are actually meant for you, the people that are actually there for you, the people that are genuine. Because if you're faking it and you have a lot of people around you, then they're fake as well, because none of you know each other. So you need to identify the version that shows up when you're under stress. And you need to start thinking about the cost. If you continue presenting this type of these types of characteristics, what kind of situations and consequences could start to show up in your life? Go to the extreme and then start to think about what you can actually do over maybe the next week, starting from today, to get to the point of wholeness. So, what small things could you do? So, if you're hiding anger, then what could you do over the next 7 days? Maybe you could, when you start to feel that bubbling up, because you're aware of it now, because you've identified it, what could you start to do when you start to feel your emotions getting a bit overwhelmed, or you start to feel like if you allow this to bubble up, it could turn into something that isn't pretty? Maybe at that moment in time, you could speak up, speak to a member of staff, speak to a teacher, speak to your parent, whoever it may be, whoever you're around, and ask for a timeout. Maybe you don't understand what's going on and you need to speak to somebody. Maybe you need to write something down. Maybe you need to go and punch a punching bag. Maybe you need to do something. But as you start to identify the situation or the environments that are causing these things, maybe it's people saying certain things about you. Maybe you're overhearing things. Maybe you're reminiscing and thinking about something that's happened to you in the past. What that is actually doing is you're pre-planning and preparing yourself for when these types of things occur. So you're not just reacting to stuff, you're prepared and you know how to navigate when they present themselves. So you're no longer hiding stuff, you're accepting what's there, and then you're learning to replace it with something that's healthier. So it's not about managing, it's about identifying and then learning the situations that cause it to bubble up, and then replacing it over time. And then don't let this be a thing about words. Let it be demonstrated in your actions. So do it. Remember, the results are never going to come just based on you doing stuff. It's about becoming the person that does those things. Identity has nothing to do with what you say. It's actually what shows up when life tests you. When your back's against the wall, what flows out of you. Because we can all pretend and we can all make it seem like we have our life together, but no one has their life together.